What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning in to this segment of Mika Says. Sukas, of course, as always, I'm your humble host, Niko House. Today I have with me a very special guest, Lloyd Chapman. He's going to talk to us today about some funny business that has been going on in the legislature and in the Trump administration regarding the PPP loans that were given out as relief for coronavirus. Lloyd, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How about yourself? Thanks.
I'm doing good. I live in Miami, man. You know, it's sunny outside. I know it's getting a little bit cold literally everywhere else, but I'm all right over here. So, but
Miami.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Never leaving. But can you let the people know a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, let's see here. I've been suing the federal government for 32 years to protect federal programs for small businesses. My lawyers tell me I've won more freedom of information lawsuits against the government than anyone in history. I don't know if that's true or not. I've won about 110. Taken on the Pentagon and the Justice Department in federal court. My win ratio was 98.5%.
Wow.
And,
well, we might need you to sue them again after what we just heard about them taking pandemic relief money.
Oh, when people, so I sue the government in federal court under the Freedom of Information Act to expose information that shows that they're cheating the public. And I've done that for 32 years, and I don't think they like me.
Well, in
fact,
in 2020,
like
it seems to be a good thing when the government doesn't like you. So,
yeah, well,
that's how you know you're doing good work. So you reached out to me because you uncovered some interesting information about the PPP loans and how small businesses and even more specifically minority businesses are being screwed out of billions of dollars. Can you go ahead and elaborate on that for me? Sure.
So the PPP program was designed to help small businesses that are being impacted by the coronavirus. And a statistic that most people don't know is that 89% of all the companies in America have less than 20 employees. And they create about 97% of the net new jobs. That surprises most people. That's U.S. Census Bureau data, right? Mm-hmm. So 89% of all U.S. firms have less than 20 employees, and they create over 97% of all net new jobs. So that's who should have gotten the PPP money. That's who should have gotten it. Right?
I would say they should have gotten the grants, honestly. But yeah, PPP money too. Because the bigger corporations got the grant money that they didn't have to pay back, but the small businesses got the loans.
Well, so for what I've seen so far, and all the people have called me, what I've seen so far is that those 89% of all U.S. companies that have less than 20 employees got virtually none of the PPP money. And some very, very big businesses got huge grants on the PPP program. And it basically is one of the reasons why I think up to a third of all small businesses in the United States of America will close permanently. And it's very, it's going to be devastating. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. I don't think anyone really understands the impact that's going to have on the national economy. So when you think about there's 30 million small businesses, they're responsible for 97% of the net new jobs, and up to a third of them are gone forever. That's going to be devastating to the economy.
Which is also going to dramatically impact the real estate industry again.
Everything. It's going to impact everything.
Again.
So, it's a tragedy. And I don't think that people really fully understand the impact it's going to have. We're sort of in kind of a bubble right now where because of some programs that did work, people are being able to stay in their apartments and stay in their homes. But I think by the end of the year, those programs are going to be gone. And I think you're going to see a lot of people that are out of work and on the street. And I think it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, I 100% agree. People really do not understand that our economy has always been at its strongest when the middle class, and more specifically the small business industry, thrives. Small business is exactly how, honestly, if we're being real, there would be no successful multinational corporations that we see today without the stability that small businesses give our economy, if that makes sense. Because
Absolutely.
you get what I'm saying? And so people
Absolutely.
don't understand that a third just never, they're not coming back. And of course, we all know in situations like that, like when you're screwed out of your house, you know, you go bankrupt, there's no 2-3 year recovery from that. That it has a long lasting impact to such a degree that people in California, for example, are gainfully employed, and yet they can't get a house because they just went bankrupt, so nobody's going to give them a loan. And on top of that, you know, these apartment complexes and real estate property managers can even see that you went bankrupt, so they're not going to rent anything to you. And so it's a permanent, long-lasting effect.
I'll tell you, I think there's the protesting that we've seen. I think that's going to go up dramatically by the end of the year. I really do.
I agree.
Because it's going to go up a lot. People are mad, but they're going to be mad, homeless, and hungry, I think, by the end of the year.
Well, I honestly believe that's what's driving a lot of the protests now, because there wasn't this much, frankly, under the Obama administration. Even though we had Occupy was pretty dismantled pretty quickly by the federal government with a little pushback from the general public. But this is different because, I mean, people have nothing to do. And when people have nothing to do, once again, and they're hungry, and then, of course, like you said, a lot of people are going to be homeless, then the only thing you can do left is fight, really. So it sounds like you have a plan to at least, if not address it directly, grow awareness so that people can understand that it needs to be addressed. Can you go ahead and let us know a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I've been studying this for many years, and I got a legal opinion from one of the nation's top attorneys on federal contracting law and federal policies, named Professor Charles Tiefer. And the legal opinion that he gave me a few weeks ago kind of backs up my research. And it looks like the federal government is cheating the American people out of about $300 billion a year. And I'll tell you that's happening. So federal law says that small businesses are supposed to get 23% of all federal contracts. Now, the total federal acquisition budget is about $1.5 trillion a year. So to fabricate compliance with that goal, the Trump administration is using a number of less than 500 billion, which is about a third of that. So in fact, I think last year they used a number of 485 billion. So they are excluding $1.1 trillion from federal acquisitions from those calculations. Does that make sense?
So they're excluding $1.1 trillion. So they're excluding $1 trillion from the small businesses who are supposed to get those contracts.
Yeah, from the calculation. So the
Understood.
law says 23% of all federal contracts, and that would be 23% of 1.5 trillion.
But they're reducing that number and only basing it off of a few billion instead.
Yeah, of about 485 billion. So they're excluding 2/3 of all federal acquisitions from those calculations to fabricate compliance with the goal. And it's cheating the public out of about 300 billion a year. And by the way, by the time Trump leaves office, it looks like, based upon all the data we can get from the government, that he'll have cheated small businesses out of $1.2 trillion. And that is small businesses owned by women, minorities, and veterans. And, it's just astounding.
The areas that have traditionally been, like the people who own businesses in areas that have generally been gentrified already. So it seems like the developers are going to have another opportunity to come in and take over. And it's probably going to be worse this time.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I saw a study by the Senate Small Business Committee several years ago that said for every 1% contracts of small businesses went up, it would create 100,000 net new jobs. So based upon our calculations, as opposed to the 23% that small businesses are supposed to get, they're getting 3%. So if we could somehow get Congress to address this and get enough media attention to get them to end all these abuses, an additional 20% would be 2 million net new jobs a year. That would be a big deal around the country.
So at this point, I have to ask, and of course this is clearly going to be a speculative answer because we just don't understand how Trump thinks about anything at all. But it seems like it would be a net positive for him, especially given that he's about to go up for re-election, to make sure that these jobs can be created which obviously would require them giving the right amount of contracts or the proportionate amount of contracts to these small businesses. Why do you think he's acting counterproductively, knowing that it could potentially hurt him if this blew up, which hopefully it will?
Well, it's very complex, but it's complex and it's simple, and I'll have to say I'm sort of neutral. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican.
Welcome to the club.
I've seen, quite frankly, every administration for 30 years has cheated the middle class, and I got involved in this when Reagan was president. And
wow, so you've seen it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the first thing Reagan did when he was elected was try to close the Small Business Administration and end all federal programs for small businesses. All right, that's the first thing he did. And he couldn't do that, so he changed the definition of small business from 100 employees to 500 employees. So remember, 89% of all U.S. firms have less than 20 employees. The average American company has 10 employees, and Reagan changed the federal definition to 500.
So that if the corporations could get all the benefits.
Yeah, so that was devastating. And then he tried to close the SBA twice and end all federal programs for small business. So this has gone on for 30 years, and it's very unfortunate. But so I said it's complex and simple. Well, here's the simple thing. It's all about greed. So Fortune 500 firms and big businesses want 100% of all the money the government spends. They don't want any money to go to small businesses. Well, the Small Business Act says 23% should go to small businesses. So for them to get all the money, they've got to get rid of that. And every Republican president in my lifetime has tried to close the Small Business Administration. That's documentable. That's not some, just my opinion.
Even Trump has tried to close the Small Business Administration thus far?
Well, let's just say this. He's cut the budget of the SBA every year he's been in office.
Effectively trying to achieve that.
Yeah. So the staffing and the budget of the Small Business Administration today has never been smaller. It's never been smaller. So the budget for the Small Business Administration was bigger when Reagan was president than it is today.
Wow.
Yeah. Think about that. Think about that.
Yeah, so for all you Trump people out there that swear Trump is great for jobs and all that good stuff, math isn't added up, people. Start doing your research.
Well, you know what? I've gone on national television, debated, people about this for years. So I like to stick to the facts. So here's the facts for Republicans. Every Republican president has tried to close the SBA. That's documentable. It's just, you can't deny it, right? And Republican members of Congress have tried to close the SBA. I remember a few years ago, I went on national television, debated Fran Tarkington when Senator Burr proposed legislation to close the SBA.
Richard Burr from North Carolina?
Yeah.
Oh, God. That guy.
Republicans appear to be, I would say, aggressively anti-small business.
And it's funny because they portray themselves as being very pro-small business.
Nothing can be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Nothing can be further from the truth. In fact, here's a challenge to all of your listeners and viewers. Try to find one Republican member of Congress in your lifetime on national television objecting to the government diverting federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms, or trying to cut the Small Business Administration budget or close the agency. I don't think you can do it. Right? So, going back over 30 years, Republicans have been anti-small business. It's just so amazing that anyone thinks that they're pro-small business because they're just not. I hope everyone will agree, you can't be pro-small business and trying to close the only agency in the United States government to help the 30 million small businesses where most Americans work.
Yeah.
Right?
I 100% agree.
So the 30 million small businesses where most Americans work, they're responsible for half the gross domestic product, half the private sector workforce, over 90% of all U.S. exports, and over 97% of all net new jobs. There's one little agency to help those companies. So if any member of Congress or any president tries to close that agency or cut the budget, I would classify them as anti-small business. And that's what Trump is, in my opinion.
So I do like to keep it objective, and I agree with you 100% about the Republican presidents, but it doesn't seem like anything necessarily got better under the Democratic presidents either. Is that your estimation as well?
Well, yeah, the Democrats are only slightly less anti-small business than the Republicans. Just a little bit, right?
I'm thinking about Glass-Steagall under Clinton and all the ways that they've been able to like even with the quote unquote Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that was really just a Trojan horse to get in Dodd-Frank, which made banks bigger and obviously hurt a lot of the smaller banks and a lot of the small businesses.
Yeah, I have to tell you something. Every U.S. president is under tremendous pressure to end all federal program for small businesses because those big companies want all the government's money. You're talking about, the government spends like $1.5 trillion a year, and the big businesses, they want that money. So any federal program that or any federal law or federal program that directs money to small businesses, they want that, eradicated. So here's my story about the Obama administration. So I worked on President Obama's campaign, and he appointed me to serve on his Small Business Advisory Committee. And I worked with this panel to put together these proposals for his small business positions when he was elected president. And he actually issued a press release that I wrote. By the way, back in those days during the Democratic primaries, I endorsed President Obama for president, and he put my endorsement on the front page of his website, which surprised me, but he put it up there, right? And so he released this press release that I wrote, and it says something like, small business is the heart of our nation's economy. It's where most Americans work. And it's time to end the diversion of federal small business contracts to corporate giants. Mm-hmm. And that was up for about 24 hours. And then they took out the part that says it's time to end the diversion of federal small business contracts to corporate giants. So I would imagine that 99% of people in America today would agree with me that the United States government should not be giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. That's pretty simple, right? Yep. You don't give small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. And I've been fighting for 32 years to get them to stop doing that. And even President Obama, would not sign on to that. And
which you would think,
I think
would be common sense.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. But think about how much pressure Obama was under.
Oh, I'm aware. I'm aware.
Background in his life. Yeah. So my observation has been that every president is under tremendous pressure to close the Small Business Administration and end all those programs simply because the big businesses, they want that money. It's greed. They want every penny the government spends. And the Small Business Act that mandates that 23% go to small businesses, the middle class, they want that shut down. And I can't remember if I said this now, but I want to emphasize the Small Business Act is the largest economic stimulus program for the American people in history. Nothing comes close. So you remember TARP and the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, remember those? Mm-hmm. I think under TARP, small businesses got $1 billion. And under the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, they got $2 billion. Well, under the Small Business Act, if they comply with it, they get $350 billion every year in perpetuity. Think about that.
Wow.
Millions of jobs would be created, right? So, the Small Business Act, to tell you the truth, when I watch television, see people protesting, I think, you guys should be protesting the fact that they're trying to repeal the Small Business Act. That's what's really hurting you. When you pull $300 billion a year out of the middle class economy, that's like a reverse economic, that's like an economic de-stimulus program, right? Mm-hmm. But people just don't know. They don't know.
Yeah, that's what I say. That's what it comes down to is they don't know. They're going to show, which obviously should be shown whenever a black person gets killed because it's good for the ratings, right? And of course, people react to what they're aware of. But I would even go as far as to say that most small businesses have zero idea that the Small Business Administration exists.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. I'll tell you something kind of interesting. So if you watch CNN for like 2 hours or an hour.
Oh, God. You're asking a lot, man. You're asking a lot.
Well, this is an experiment, okay? So watch CNN for an hour, and you'll see commercials targeted to small businesses, right? Every 15 minutes, you'll see a commercial targeted to small businesses, but you won't see CNN mention small business in any story. So what amazes me is it seems like the national media almost won't mention small business. It's quite surprising that it's incredibly rare. Maybe it happens twice a year that somebody on national television will mention the fact that 97% of all U.S. firms have less than 20 employees, and they create 97% of all net new jobs. You just won't see that. So it's quite fascinating.
It only happens during election season and very rarely. You might hear it during a debate once or a stomping speech.
Yeah, well, you know
once.
what? I tell you something. I remember in the first debates between Trump and Hillary Clinton, the first question, I believe, was, what do you know about the economy? And the first thing she said was, small business create most of the jobs. That's the first thing she said. I was like, yay, thank you. But
Which
Trump,
of course she knows.
They
know, they just do the opposite. They're fully aware because they have to understand to screw small businesses to the degree that they have. You have to have an intricate understanding of how it works.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one thing that I noticed is Trump never mentioned small business in his campaign. Not once.
No, he says working class and middle class. He never mentioned small businesses specifically.
No. So it was, the only time Trump mentioned small business was after the coronavirus pandemic hit, and then he talked about it. But if you go back and look, he never, mentioned small businesses. And again, that's where most Americans work. Most Americans work for small businesses,
Mm-hmm.
But so here's another thing. And this may sound like a conspiracy theory, whatever, but it's not. It's almost impossible to get a story in the national media about the government cheating small businesses. It's just almost impossible. I've had,
that's true. I never thought about it, but I've tried to get stories about how small businesses have been gutted or gentrified, or I talked about the PPP loans in the. I was trying to cover the fact that a lot of, I guess you'll call them independent contractors, like barbers, hairdressers, people like that. None of them got their loans. None of them that I know ever got a loan, and they own business.
Me either. I had a lot of people call me from the country. I had a barber from Oregon call me, and he needed like maybe $10,000 and he couldn't get it.
Yeah, he wasn't. Same here. They weren't even asking for a lot of money.
It's quite fascinating that it's the pressure that I've seen people put under to not report on this is quite shocking. It's just shocking. I've had.
Look at the sponsors. Who's sponsoring them? What ads are they running? And then you'll know the answer.
All right. So here's a couple of things. Let me see if I get this straight in my mind, right? National media, like television, that's a business. And their customers are their advertisers. They're not the people that are watching, right? So if you're watching, any ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, whatever, their customers are the advertisers. And their advertisers are Fortune 500 firms. Now, Fortune 500 firms have two things they want to accomplish. They want their taxes cut, and they want less regulation. Now, their argument for cutting their taxes is, if you cut our taxes, we'll create jobs.
Which
the Census
Bureau
also
doesn't even make sense, by the way. I don't know where people even get that idea from, but it just never worked out.
So the truth is that Fortune 500 firms haven't created one net new job since 1980. So Fortune 500 firms do.
You're telling me Fortune 500 net jobs created is one?
Zero.
Oh, zero. Oh, it's actually zero. Oh, God. I did not know that. That's crazy.
Not one since 1980. And that's Census Bureau data. A company called the Kauffman Foundation put out a study a few years ago that said all the net new jobs come from new businesses. Well, there's no new Fortune 500 firms, right?
Wow.
So think about this. So you've got national media. Their customers are Fortune 500 firms who want their taxes cut. And their argument is, cut our taxes, we'll create jobs. So they don't want the stories in the national media that, oh, by the way, Fortune 500 firms haven't created one net new job since 1980, that companies with less than 20 employees are responsible for over 97% of net new jobs. So I think could possibly be why it's almost impossible to get stories in the national media about the fact that small businesses are the heart and soul of our nation's economy, and they create all the jobs. That's where the economic growth is, because the Fortune 500 firms don't want that story out there. And the Fortune 500 firms, their lobby is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Are you familiar with that, Niko?
Sorry. Yeah.
You're very familiar with it?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, so the U.S. Chamber is the lobby for the Fortune 500 firms. And although, let's just say, even liberal, like Google and Facebook and Twitter, those are liberal companies, right? Well, they don't want their taxes cut. So they're in the same boat with Exxon Mobil and Westinghouse and Fortune 500 companies. So when it comes to taxes, all big businesses are in the same position. They want their taxes cut, and they want that story out there that if you cut their taxes, they'll create jobs. But it's just not true.
I think about it.
I think
they're the big corporations are the ones that are constantly and regularly downsizing. Obviously with small businesses, it's so hard to come by a good employee that you don't want to get rid of your good employees if you don't have to, because you're not beholden to shareholders, quote unquote. And so I guess it does make sense that when you factor in the market crashes, plus the regular downsizing that corporations go through, these Fortune 500 companies specifically go through, I guess it makes sense that they haven't created any new jobs. I guess I just never thought about it. I thought it was maybe a few, like maybe 5 or 6% of the new jobs, but none. I would have never guessed.
And again, this is Census Bureau data. This is not Lloyd Chapman's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's to tell you the truth, the statistic actually, there's all these statistics is 98% of all U.S. firms have less than 100 employees. And they're responsible for about 99% of net new jobs. So if companies with less than 100 employees are responsible for 99%, there's only 1% left, right? And that's for companies with 101 and up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, that's pretty much, I think.
Wow. That's all some pretty crazy information. Can you let people know how they can follow your work?
Well, you can go to my website, asbl.com. I'm getting ready to launch a new website. That one's like 10 years old. You can go to a couple of websites. LloydChapman.com has all my national TV appearances, and you can follow that. But I think people should call your congressman, your senator, anybody you can, and tell them you don't want them to close the SBA and in federal programs for small businesses and for minority-owned small businesses, woman-owned small businesses, veteran-owned small businesses. And people need to realize the Small Business Act is the single largest economic stimulus program for the American people in history. And we need to support that program and make sure that Trump doesn't end it.
100% agree. Thank you so much for coming on, Lloyd. I wish you luck going forward and growing the awareness of what's happening to our small businesses and what these administrations have been doing. For everybody else, thank you all so much for tuning into this interview here on Mika Says Sukasa. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.